Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Well, I'm delighted to have Mary Waldner, the founder of Mary's Gone Crackers, here with me today. Thank you, Mary, for making time and space to join us on Next Economy Now.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks.
So many of our listeners I know are enamored with healthy food, and your products are some of the hallmark thought leader type of products that people think about when they think about healthy, clean food. And I'm wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about your story. How did Mary's Gone Crackers get started, and what led you to make some of the incredible decisions you've made around your supply chain and choices around health and ingredients?
Well, the product actually was developed. I developed the original cracker in 1995. I was diagnosed in 94 with celiac disease. I had been sick all of my life and never knew why. So it was a pretty exciting time for me to clean out my kitchen and start over and feel a whole lot better than I ever had. And the crackers I developed as a need when I went out. Cooking at home was easy. Going to restaurants and parties and other gatherings was very challenging. And I had the idea for the ingredients. I wasn't sure what form it would take, but the cracker is what emerged. During that, actually, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I had a private psychotherapy practice in the Bay Area for 26 years before I stopped doing that work. But, and I always had a very holistic view of health and healing because of my own illness. So I was probably one of the first people on the bandwagon of eating organically and eating whole, real, clean food, because I knew what was wrong with me was food related. I just didn't know what. So all the food that I made was always organic when possible, when those ingredients were available. So the product was a clean, whole, healthy, organic product from the very beginning. After years of making them by hand, I just watched other people eat them and go crazy over them. And I knew it was not a normal reaction to a cracker. And I just woke up one morning and said to my husband that we needed to make these and we needed to manufacture them because they were very labor intensive. And I knew I couldn't just give people the recipe because it was ridiculous how much time it took to make them. So So in 99, we started researching and learning about the food industry and manufacturing and raising money and writing business plans and all of that. And so long, intense story. In 2004, we launched the company with having just begun to figure out how to manufacture these crackers, but that's where we started.
Wonderful. And at that moment, when you were figuring out how to manufacture the crackers at a larger scale, did you actually take on, with developing the business plan and being diligent about thinking about the future of the business, seeing this opportunity, did you actually raise capital at that moment? I know a number of our listeners are entrepreneurs and they have an idea for a food product, and some of them come to us and say, I'm ready to raise capital, and we're not so sure always. So I'm kind of curious what your process was.
Right. Well, we did. We had to raise money from the very beginning. This was not a product that we could make on a small scale. I mean, I had been making them on a small scale in my kitchen, but there wasn't no gradual way to do it because of the labor and time constraints. So unlike a lot of food entrepreneurs where you can gradually grow, I mean, my ideal situation would have been to open up a corner bakery, but there was no way to do it that way. So we did raise money to buy equipment and to begin to automate that process. I don't, I think some of our biggest challenges were dealing with investors. So I would not recommend that to entrepreneurs if you could help it at all. Our first round of investment, half of the group were friends and family, which is why we survived, really. The other half were kind of friends of friends and more bigger investment kind of minded people, and it was a challenge from the very beginning, actually.
Yeah, we hear that as being really common. It's definitely a benefit to look at your relationships with those who might finance the company. As a woman entrepreneur, one thing that we find as common right now, it's especially challenging to even be able to access capital. Did that come up for your company at that stage at all, or is that not part of the challenge?
Well, we raised money through people that we knew in the very beginning. So, and like I said, friends and friends of friends, and people who were excited and inspired by what we were doing, and people who knew us. So, raising money is always a challenge, but I don't think that I don't think it was more challenging because I was a woman. In fact, I was already in my early 50s. I had a lot of contacts. One of the first people that invested were some people that I knew from graduate school. So it was that kind of thing. But also I had contacts, like I said, I was just kind of a health food nut. So I knew a lot of people in the health food world just personally, and really it was the cracker. The cracker just, people loved it. That's why they wanted to invest.
And that's where it all starts, right? Is actually having a product with a really strong core value proposition, something that people need that's really high quality. Right. Yeah. And so all entrepreneurs should kind of start there.
Right. And think about why, like we joked, does the world really need another cracker? But apparently the world did. And I think it's certainly a unique product, but also what is in that, what it represents, like you're saying about clean ingredients, whole food. I just continue to be amazed at at what it touches in people. I think even more than just the product itself.
And so when you started growing quite a bit in the early 2000s, and you're manufacturing, you've raised some capital, and you're expanding the relationships you have with suppliers of the ingredients, what was that process like? Is there anything that comes to mind that you might share with success stories or failures along that journey of finding the right types of suppliers?
Well, that's actually one of the most fun things for me. In the very beginning, you buy a pallet worth of ingredients, which is not, it sounds like a lot, 2,500 pounds or something like that, but that's very small scale. And so we had to go through food brokers, and I didn't really know very many of the actual growers. The rice that we used, which was our largest ingredient, we always got directly from local California rice growers. In fact, we still do, which is kind of amazing. But otherwise, we just went through organic food brokers. But as we got bigger and started to buy enough where we could go direct to the suppliers, that's when it got to be much more fun for me, because then I started to learn about who these farmers were, especially quinoa, which is back then nobody knew what quinoa was, and I found the supplier that we were buying from was actually a women's cooperative in Ecuador, and then an indigenous cooperative also in Ecuador. So it just was a lot of fun. Now, the challenge, of course, is that when you buy ingredients, farm ingredients, you're dependent on the weather. You're dependent on all the ins and outs of growing food, and it's also, though, when those relationships mattered the most, because, for example, one year there was a really bad rice crop, and organic is much smaller, obviously, than conventional growing ingredients. And because we'd had a relationship with this family who's grown organic rice in the Sacramento Valley for a long time, they decided to make sure we had enough rice, and they said no to some of their larger customers because they knew us, and because they knew that we were really more dependent on them, and their larger customers didn't care as much about organic and all that kind of stuff. So relationships are key and fun, as far as I'm concerned. So it's there have been challenges. Obviously, a volcano erupted in Ecuador one year and fogged out the whole quinoa crop, and that this is just what happens when you buy food. Yeah.
There's always the risk inherent in partnering with nature in our supply chain. Always.
Right.
What about the risks of growth? We hear a lot of businesses that are intent on maintaining their values and ethics, their choices, their focus on relationships, say, as an example, in their supply chain or in their distribution. I'm wondering if you've navigated growth being so early into organic and GMO-free and quinoa and gluten-free products. You were there kind of first, and that space has obviously grown rapidly. How did you navigate, or is there anything that comes to mind that you might share around the challenges and opportunities to navigate growth while maintaining your values?
Well, I think in terms of maintaining the values and the quality of our product, it was woven into our business from the very beginning. Being certified organic, that was that. Right. We didn't have to worry about that, except to make sure we had enough supply. I think the biggest challenge to maintaining our integrity came as we needed more money. We needed more cash. The more you grow, the more money you need, which again, that was not something we knew or understood. And so we eventually, within 2007, so 3 years into it, we took money from a venture capital group, and that was the biggest challenge, bar none, to starting and growing the company. We were on just a rocket ship growth, which everyone thinks sounds wonderful, but it's hugely challenging to develop it, to expanding a team, to expanding production, to everything. In terms of keeping the product, having integrity with our product, that was not an issue. And I think that it's one of the things I challenge people when they talk about starting companies, that they say, well, we can't start with organic because it's too expensive. But I don't know when else to start, because if you don't weave that into who you are, I think it just gets harder and harder to add that in later. And it was obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but to me, obviously, what made us who we are. The challenge, I think, came when we took money from a VC group who's they were very supportive of organic and all of that, but their agenda was to basically get rid of us and take over the company and grow it really quickly and sell it. And so the integrity of who we were and our vision, what became a challenge every day.
Right. And so taking on venture capital with its kind of the liquidity and growth thesis that's inherent in venture private equity, or most of venture private equity, kind of puts this motivation for the partners in a venture capital firm to kind of take more control to achieve the outcomes that they want, even though you were growing as a solid business. So they provided some capital to you. That cash was critical for you to continue growth. But even so, they were looking for outcomes that fit their business model, which, you know, that's just the nature of how investment works. But what you're hearing you say is a pattern we hear a lot, is that can create a lot of friction with the founding team and the development of a strong culture at the company, even if the product is insulated somewhat because they were on board with organic, which is good news. Just the actual management of people and what you wanted to see happen with the company, how you wanted to navigate growth became harder. Is that right? Something like that? Well,
yes, but I think I like what you said about, even though we were growing, you know, the challenge was that they came in with a recipe for how to handle their investments, which was they didn't pay attention to our unique situation. Their recipe was get rid of the founders, take control of the board, and grow the company, because founders don't know how to do that. And we took, you know, we were very naive, but we took money from them because they were all founders of, I called them the godfathers of the organic food industry. They all had grown, you know, significant organic food companies, and we thought it would be a great partnership. And I still think it could have been, had they decided to really partner with us, but that was not their agenda at all. And we had no idea. You know, I don't know. I would hope that VC groups don't do it like this anymore, but they really lied to us in every way. And we were naive enough to believe them. But if they had truly been a partner with us, I think we could have just gone really far. We needed a lot of help in manufacturing, and you know, we knew a lot, but we needed help. And instead we ended up battling them for 5 years. They sued us. I mean, we spent more money on lawyers than anything that they ever gave us. But yeah, it was really unfortunate.
And can you remind, I know the answer, but maybe you can remind the listeners how that kind of all played out for you in the long run, because obviously the product is still extraordinary. The products are extraordinarily successful. So, and in the market today. So maybe you could remind the listeners what happened.
Well, the irony is that while we were spending all this money and energy inside the company fighting our investors, outside the company, the product continued to just go crazy in the marketplace, and we were doing really well and continued to do really well. And all these little battles that we had with this group, we won, we beat them. And, you know, more than any other investment that they made, we watched them kind of take over all these other companies they invested in and pretty much destroy the companies. And we beat them so that we never lost control. And eventually, the only way we could get rid of them was to sell the company. They refused to let us buy them out individually. So we had to sell a majority share of the business at the end of 2012, which we did. We found actually, we had been pursued by a Japanese company, the largest rice cracker company in Japan bought us. And so that's how we got rid of the VC group as well as all of our other investors. And they made a lot of money, and but they went away. So now we have a partner in a Japanese company that, that's another whole story, but we're still there. And I think they're learning. What I love about them is they care about the integrity of the brand and the product, and that's what matters to me too. So
there's some alignment there. So the cautionary tale is when partnering with capital in general is finding that authentic alignment, partnership, relationship, which can be really challenging to foresee sometimes. So it's hard.
Yes.
Hard to
yes.
know.
And also the sense of time. There's a whole slow money now movement and organization, and I think that our whole business model in the U.S. has become, it wasn't this way before, but it's become this quick turnaround, grow fast and sell. And food companies, some food companies that might work, but as a manufacturing company, which is unusual also, most food companies don't make their own products. So they're really marketing and sales companies, but we are a manufacturing company, and that takes time, especially with a product like ours where we invented new technology. We got more and more efficient over the years, but that takes time. So to make sure that when you take money from people that there is a conversation about what's their agenda in terms of getting a return on their investment, and how does that measure with your vision of how long it might take you to grow.
That's a wonderful consideration to remind the listeners about in terms of their entrepreneurial efforts and partnerships with capital. So given that you have continued success in the products, and the category of gluten-free, organic, non-GMO, healthy food has grown, what kind of things are you excited about? What's happening in the food system that takes your attention, that grabs your attention right now?
Well, let me think about that. I see interesting things in the raw food category. I don't, frankly, see a lot of great things in the gluten-free section. I'm still, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in organic in the gluten-free world. I think that the mentality in most gluten-free gatherings that I've been to has been to service the need of gluten-free people to eat the way regular Americans eat, which means, junk food, replacing the Oreos and the donuts and the bagels and all the junk food that we enjoy with gluten-free versions. And we all feel deprived, and we all need that once in a while, but I haven't seen a lot of interest in the whole real food that matters to me as a gluten-free person. So I'm still waiting for other companies to jump on board with my values. But I see that in other space. I see that in the raw food. I see that a little bit in the paleo movement, where people are using whole real food. I still think there's a lot of room for all the alternative grains, which are not very paleo, but there's so many. This has been the fun part of gluten-free for me, is that there's so many great whole grains that instead of just replacing wheat with rice and corn and tapioca, there's so many grains. There's so many amazing things that people could be playing with and creating great products that are nutritious and delicious. And I want to see more of that still.
So there's still a lot of room for innovation, and
I think so. Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious if you're able to share what's next for you personally in the journey with Mary's Gone Crackers. What are some of the things that you're working on, if you're able to share?
Well, I don't think I want to name names, but there's a lot of great products that I'm ready to launch. Again, I think that the learning curve for the Japanese company is been a little slower than I'd hoped, but they have been automating our process, which is what we really need help with. They are manufacturers in Japan, so they're really good with equipment, and they've invested a lot in a new facility. So I think once that's really taking off, which I hope is in the next year, we will be able to launch new products and that keep with the whole clean, real food values that we've had all along. I still play with food in my kitchen, and I have a bunch of ideas, and I hope I don't have control of the R&D anymore, but I hope that that we hit the market with some of them. I'm looking forward to that.
It's exciting. I'm also curious about the company. One thing that our listeners are exploring frequently is taking a company as a whole in consideration. What are the diverse ways a company can have a beneficial impact socially and environmentally, maybe even beyond the obvious? Your product speaks for itself in terms of embedding your values into something that's healthy, clean, and supporting relationships and partnerships in the supply chain. But I'm wondering if there's anything that you want to elaborate there on, or if there's anything that the company is doing that you're particularly proud of, or maybe that the company is moving into that is indicative of a more or greater beneficial impact.
Well, I think that the biggest, other than, like you said, the obvious, which is the product, which I don't want to underestimate, because organic, we're buying, over 4 million pounds of organic rice every year, which just has a huge impact on the planet. But I think the other thing that we were not prepared for, and that we could have done better, is creating a community with our employees. We grew so quickly that I think that's where we could have planned better. There's a million things we could have planned better, but you don't know what that's going to look like. And we had a little bit of vision for what it meant to bring this product out into the world, but we didn't really understand what it meant to have 250 employees and how huge of an impact on your community that is. And I think that if I went back, I would have spent a little more time and energy to make sure that we took care of that a little bit better. And saw and just make sure that we had the resources. That was the other thing. We moved into a community that was right near the rice growing, and that had the building and had that kind of stuff. But we didn't have the employee pool that I think would have been better. And then I don't think we did as great a job with building the kind of environment for our people that I wish that we had done. So we went from 20 or 30 employees to 200 employees really quickly, and didn't really have the resources to do that as well as we could have. So I think we all underestimated the impact on community that a business like ours has. So
it's a common pattern. We see that with a lot of companies that experience kind of that type of growth. it can be challenging to anticipate those impacts. And I think it's I really appreciate the strength of you being vulnerable enough to share that you might have done things differently. Are there things that you watch now that inspire you? Companies doing things in terms of their either cultural practices or impact, maybe young companies that you're watching that you're even if not naming names, if there's practices or things that you're tracking that you're inspired by?
Well, yeah, I love when people have a big enough vision to start. Like I said about organic, when you start with something and you weave it into who you are as a company, it's much easier to maintain it and develop it and grow it. And I always really love seeing companies that think about their employees, think about maybe employee ownership, or again, I think that happens. You have a better ability to do that when you control more of your company, because we took on investors so early. We didn't have as much control to weave those kinds of things into our business model. But I love watching companies who have a little slower growth, but can weave into their foundation, taking care of employees, including them in future ownership, because I think that's just wonderful. Because, I imbued my values into my product, but it was my employees that made that happen. It was their love and their commitment that made us who we are. And I think anybody that runs a business knows that. And I didn't know that before, but I sure learned it quickly. And so if I could have woven that into taking care of them and including them in ownership, I would have. And I love watching businesses do that.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I'm kind of some of the patterns that I'm seeing from some of the other businesses that we've worked with and talked to is that these kind of early conditions, what choices you make at the outset, how important that can be, and also after growth, how hard it is to change for better or for worse, right? So I think for the product, you're embedding of your values into the product, and even kind of your innovative spirit of even being in the kitchen today and innovating manufacturing processes, those types of things, it feels like those got instilled into the company and are part of the fabric or DNA of what the company does and will be, kind of no matter what, in terms of how it's capitalized or otherwise. And maybe there's things that you're excited to see other companies do today in terms of seeing how a company, once it has grown, has such an outsized impact on the community, embedding certain either structures or practices into the company at the outset. So I really appreciate those insights. It's very reaffirming for some of the other stories we hear from companies in this next economy.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. Like I've talked to people who say, well, when they're such and such size, or when they're making X amount of money, they'll reformulate to include organic ingredients. But, I think that's a lot harder to do, because you've already established relationships with suppliers. You're already used to a certain level of profitability. It's a hard stretch. And like I said, if you weave it in to the very beginning, it's much easier.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that's a message that a lot of entrepreneurs and companies working in the next economy need to hear, along with the cautionary tales around how we capitalize and finance the growth products that the world needs. Mary, right. I'm curious if there's anything else you want to share with the listeners of Next Economy Now in terms of your story as it's continuing to evolve, or resources or references that might be interesting to them, or even something about how and where. I think a lot of people know your goods because they're pretty ubiquitous in a lot of the markets, but maybe if there's anything special you want to share about that, I'm curious.
Well, I think the thing that comes to mind in our conversation is the the challenge of just starting a company and why, especially in the food business, why you would do this. We got a lot of advice in the beginning not to even do this because everyone knows the statistics about how many companies fail. But I think that that what I would suggest for people is that they know their market. They know as much as possible who it is that they're talking to, that they're selling to. If everyone in the more traditional side of food business, and this is kind of the push that I get even now, talks about doing focus groups and talks about finding out what the consumer wants. But if we had done that, nobody would have been interested in our product. I just knew what was coming. And so I think it's important to, instead of catering to what you think is going to make money, and doing what other people have already done, which I can't imagine why anybody would want to. It's so hard to start a company. Why would you want to do something that someone's already doing?
Yeah.
Find that place, find that niche where you see what's coming and you see what's needed, and go into that creative space. And I think that I knew that there were celiac people out there. Now, I had no idea how popular our product was going to be, but I knew that we were going to speak to people, not just gluten-free people, but people who wanted a clean product that tasted really good. And that's who I was focusing on. And I had, like I said, I had no idea the tidal wave that was coming right behind us. But that's where I would suggest that people that they trust what they know, and that they do some research into who their market might be, because and then stay with that vision. Holding on to our vision was the most challenging and the most important part of what we did, because if we had listened to what people told us, we would not have done this. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think it's really important for people to hear. There's a question that has been raised a number of times on this podcast as to do markets know what they want?
What's coming? Right. Yeah. No, how could they?
Right.
Yeah. And traditional food companies, and I imagine this is true in other industries, the bigger and more established they get, the more cautious they have to be. Right. And so that's when they're turning more to what's more profitable and what do consumers really want. I mean, I'm watching that happen in our company as well. And I understand, it's harder to take risks, but if you're starting a business, you should be out there taking those risks, educated risks.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's really inspiring, and I hope brings renewed enthusiasm to the entrepreneurs that are currently persevering and manifesting their vision and the service they want to bring to their market. And just deep appreciation and gratitude from us at Lift Economy and Next Economy Now to you, Mary, for holding the line on your organic values, your clean food values, your relational partnership-oriented approach to a supply chain, working with co-ops and families, and never wavering off of that, embedding that in from the beginning. Very grateful, because we know that's not easy. It does take a certain amount of courage and perseverance, and for your foresight and prescience. You were certainly ahead of the curve on a number of trends. So it's fun to talk to you about that, and to learn that you kind of saw it coming, and everybody told you not to do it. And you
don't do it, right? Exactly. Yeah,
that's
right.
That's exciting.
Well, I've always been a fringe member of society, and finally my fringe became mainstream. So it's kind of nice. Who knew?
Who knew?
You live long enough, maybe that'll happen.
That's great. I appreciate that story. And if I think we'll make sure that people know about, again, I'm sure everybody knows your products, but we'll put a link to Mary's contact.
Oh, great.
So that,
Okay.
Yeah. And so thank you. And
my pleasure.
I look forward to staying in touch.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.